Welcome to the WAIR Chats podcast, a series where we dive into the conversations surrounding all facets of e-commerce and the people working to make it a more sustainable and productive industry for all. My name is Greg Moore, founding CEO of WAIR, and your host for today's podcast. Today, I'm joined by Alexa Kilroy, head of brand at Triple Whale. We chat about how she went from being a high school English teacher to being head of brand for an e-commerce AI data platform, how to crowdsource customer feedback for product development, and why good SaaS marketing means becoming a student of your customer. I like to start off getting to know the person behind the business person. And so in that sense, I always have these models that stick with me through my childhood that help me to become who I am today. And I was wondering if there's anything that you heard your parents gave you or someone you looked up to, any mottos that you heard that kind of helped you become who you are today?
Yeah, I am very fortunate that I have a pretty tough Italian mama, a very no BS mama, as I like to say. And I was not particularly like an athletic kid. I was a band kid. I was choir president. I'm not sure how it was at your school, but those kids do not tend to be the cool kids. And so in my youth, as I struggled through that at times, my mom just always instilled in me that it's essential to just always move forward with kindness, like kill people with kindness. Even when people drive you nuts, just try and be the best version of yourself that you can always be and always shine bright and bring light to rooms. And then always just be authentic to who you are, because even if they don't like it and appreciate it today, because they're twerpy 15-year-olds, people will love it and appreciate it, one day for who you are. And you'll kind of find your space in the world. And so my friends will often remark, if I'm driving with them in the car and I have to call a restaurant, tell them we're late or something, they're always like, "You're so nice. Why are you so nice to people all the time?" Just like, I'm not trying to be nice. That's just like how I was raised, and that's how it was instilled in me. And that kindness and authenticity I bring everywhere I can go. When I'm working with folks in a professional space, when I'm hanging out with friends, I just try and bring it everywhere with me, and it's worked out pretty well so far.
I love that. It's so my favorite motto is return home with honor, which is very similar to that, right? It's kind of like that, bring that kindness, make sure that you represent your family well. But your story reminds me, one of my best buddies, his name's Matt Verosco. We were actually born in the same hospital in Alaska, of all places, but didn't meet till 13 years later in Florida, which is a really weird story. Anyway, he did the same thing. Like, we would drive around and we'd go pick up on McDonald's or something, right? And he would stop with the person taking our order. He's like, "How are you today?" And the people were just like, "What? I'm great. Like, what do you mean?" He's like, "No, I really
What's wrong?
know, right?" He would have these conversations with everybody. And on the one hand, it kind of slowed down what we're trying to do. But on the other hand, he would bring so much light to people's faces. And I'll never forget that. And that has followed through on everything that I've looked at. So almost every personal interaction that I have, whether you're a janitor or taking my order at some crazy place when I'm driving through with my kids, or the CEO of some company, it doesn't matter who you are, but it's that same concept of how can I provoke kindness in this conversation? So I love it. I love that that's your motto.
Yeah.
Picking on that a little bit, how do you do that in challenged conversations, right? So when you get to a conversation, I don't know, with an employee who maybe is not performing or something, you still want to have that same motto, but how do you navigate that?
So a couple things. One, I became a master of conflict resolution when I went through teaching school and was a high school English teacher. Because as I know, you have kids. Yours are, I believe, younger than high schoolers. But I used to teach 13 to 18-year-olds every day. And there's pretty much nothing more terrifying than a hormonal, cranky 13-year-old that walks into your classroom and decides that they just want to light a fire on your day. And so I would say when I was in college, I was going through a teaching program that had similar to nursing clinicals where you teach during the day and take classes at night. And I taught out of undergrad as well. And I got a lot of reps of just conflict resolution with 30 kids in a room, and then also having to do one-on-one parent-teacher conferences where you have to say hard things to people about their kids that they sometimes don't want to hear. And that was definitely just a lot of, working the muscle. But I think my philosophy is always seek to understand. I come from a farm town in the middle of nowhere, Maryland, where there are a lot of people that have a lot of different philosophical, ideological, religious beliefs than myself. And I think I learned from a young age that you're not always going to agree with people, but what you can do is try and find things that you do agree with on them, find some goodness or some commonalities in there with them, and then seek to understand why they feel the way that they do, they're performing the way that they do. And then it gets easier from there. Because I think our natural instinct is just to be like, this thing is wrong. It is bothering me. I want to fix it. I want to problem solve. But you can either try and duct tape holes in the Titanic when someone's having performance issues or something like that, or you can try and understand what's causing the holes. And then
I've never heard that before.
oh yeah, you can try and have a meaningful conversation and really bring it to a broader point, so those holes aren't being made anymore. And I think that's where I try and approach things from even when I'm being driven up the wall.
I love it. I think that's so smart. Seek to understand is always a very hard. So it's a very hard thing to do in certain cases, but I have found that if you can do that, it absolutely levels the playing field and actually helps you to get towards that common ground and that resolution so much easier. So very, very cool. All right, so let's switch over to the business side of Alexa. So walk me through your career. So you started off as an English teacher. Now you're head of brand at a really fast growing SaaS company catering to e-commerce. How'd you get there?
Just woke up no, I'm kidding. Just woke up one day. I was like, oh, new year, new me. No, that is not what happened at all. Yeah, so my whole life I thought I wanted to be a teacher. I went to Boston College for this very specific program, like I said, where it's like nursing clinicals, where you really bust your butt. I was taking classes at night when I was 21 years old, a senior in college, wanted to party with my friends, didn't really get the chance. Worked out well for me in the long run, probably healthier habits, but yeah, so I did this really kind of intense teaching program. I taught for 1 year out of college. I'd moved to Austin, Texas because I wanted to get out of the snow. And frankly, I was just super broke. I was 21, 22 years old. Everyone that I worked with was 50 years or older. Mm-hmm. And teaching is just the most emotionally demanding and draining job. Mm-hmm. And then you go home and you grade and plan for the next day and you do it again. And then you do it on the weekends and you have no life. God bless every teacher out there. There's a reason we have a teacher shortage. Pay your teachers more if you're listening, but probably not the audience for this pod, but yeah, if you have kids, just know your child's teacher is probably going through it towards the end of the school year. So send them a bottle of wine or a snack or something. But yeah, so I did that. And I was like, I need to pivot. I know I need to pivot at this point in my life in order to move forward in my life. And so I got a foot in the door job doing post-sales account management, data review for an ed tech company working with school districts. Again, was bored to tears, wasn't fulfilled, did it for 6 months, set myself as open to getting hired on LinkedIn and got recruited to work at an e-commerce brand. I was employee number 3 there. I was doing chargebacks and really boring work, admittedly. Customer support calls, but crawled my way up. I was I have an English background. I used to be an English teacher. Let me try copywriting. I used to do photography and videography. Let me start making ad creative. The founders ended up deciding that they wanted to go to Switzerland for 2 weeks and needed someone to run their media buying. So they gave me a crash course and then I ended up loving it and started doing it. And so cool. I ended up, staying with them, for a while, kind of up through COVID, era, 2020 era, running growth marketing and leading their advertising team and program. Then did some dabbling here and there after that, but generally stayed in e-commerce and growth marketing. Most recently was at a family wellness company called First Day that makes kids gummy vitamins. Okay. Led growth marketing and advertising there. And then actually got recruited through Twitter from my former CMO, Raba, who was like, I like your tweets. You want to come hang out one day? We live in the same city. And I was like, sure, why not? Yeah. And we sat down, had drinks a couple times, and he was like, I want to build a job for you at Triple Whale. What kinds of things would be fun and interesting? And we kind of landed on the title Head of Brand, though I don't think it's an entirely accurate representation of all the things that I do. Yeah. But I started Triple Whale when it was probably somewhere between 20 and 40 people. I don't even remember. And now we're very close to 200. I think I want to say like 180, 190 now. And I joined literally today is my 1 year anniversary at the company.
Holy moly. So unbelievably fast growth there then.
Nutso. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love the fact that throughout that process, when you had the opportunities or when you saw the opportunities, you just simply took them. I think that I do a fair amount of guest lecturing at undergrad programs in the Bay Area. And a lot of I won't say kids, I'll say students, but they're like, how do you kind of drive your career forward? Like, who's going to give you the opportunity? And in every circumstance, like, you take the opportunity. You don't get given it. Like, this is not a world for passive people. If you want to promote and to grow and to get, more stabilized in your career, and you having kind of a testament story to that is actually really, really cool.
Yep.
Were you met with any, like, as you were doing that, were you met with any times you're just like totally failed? You're like, oh, I totally.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, like, if I look back at when I was a baby media buyer, I literally did not know what I was doing. I'm historically one of the worst, like, mathematicians in the universe. Like, I had to truly actually learn how to use Excel for the first time, like, post grad. I'd never like looked at financial modeling spreadsheets and then built an advertising budget, and even just technically navigating things in growth marketing. Like, there were times when I accidentally deleted like one of our most profitable Facebook ad campaigns. And it was partially a glitch and it was partially me. Like, there should have been multiple buttons to stop me, but there was only one. I thought I was archiving it. I deleted it.
Oh, no.
And it was like at 10 p.m. at night. I was working too late. I was super stressed out. My boss was offline. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to fix it. I ended up just manually rebuilding back the whole campaign myself and like figuring it out. And it took literally all night. I was up till like 3. So like there have been a billion mishaps along the way. And a lot of them have been because I didn't have core skill sets that were necessary to grow and thrive in a role, like being good at analyzing data and looking at math and making decisions. And it was like, well, if I want to grow in my career or I want to advance in this opportunity, I'm going to have to go figure out how to do it. And I'm going to spend my free time studying or figuring out how to do it well. And then I'm going to learn how to do it. And then I'm going to do it well. So many a mishap, but also many a learning opportunity. I'm very much a growth mindset person.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's awesome. So look, let's transition over to Triple Whale, and like the kind of the concept here is let's frame this as, I'm a startup. I sell a SaaS service to e-commerce, and I'm kind of building my marketing engine. How do I go about it? And then kind of based in content. So one of the things that I'm constantly curious of is, let's say you had that as your stage, right? How do you start? Where do you start thinking about marketing, about lead gen, about content deployment and stuff like that? What are the first sort of words that you put on the paper to start building those strategies?
The way that I phrase it to other people is become a student of your customer. So frankly, like, there's no reality in which you're going to produce good quality content, high quality content that either captures leads or retains customers or whatever, unless you understand your customer really well. And if you don't have customers yet, then you need to figure out who your ICP is going to be, and then learn every possible thing that you can learn about them. I think one of like the tragic flaws in SaaS marketing that I constantly see are these marketers that they either join into a content role where they're being hired because the expectation is like, hey, we need to produce more content and we need to produce content at volume. We're going to hire you to come in and do that. And then there's this immediate pressure to like start churning at volume without really thinking strategically about what formats you want to make it in, who the audience is, all that kinds of stuff. And so they just don't, like, people starting in that role don't really get the startup time to actually properly strategize. Or alternatively, you have a SaaS company that's relatively new and perhaps has never had anyone really start working on content before, but feels this pressure like, we need content marketing. What are we going to do? Like, we have an attribution platform. We're just going to write like 55,000 different articles about what attribution is and means and does, right? And it's like, that's not really valuable. And then you got to also consider like, what is the purpose of what I'm doing? So there's a different strategy for everything. There's a different strategy for retention-based content. There's a different strategy for lead gen-based content. There's a strategy for just having cool content that like gets the buzz and the word about your brand out there. And so you kind of really need to sit down and figure out like, okay, who am I making it for and why am I making it first? And then what does my customer look like, need, want to absorb information about? And from there, you can then figure out things like, what format do I want to make it in? Is it going to be long form or short form? Like start to get into the weeds on things.
Got it. It makes total sense. It's funny. I think about that. Like it's kind of like playing golf in a sense when you're a bit more of a seasoned golfer, right? You kind of play the hole backwards in your mind. And so for example, like if it's a, 350-yard hole, I'm not just going to go out there and blast a driver and then have this weird sort of chip shot back. It's like, all right, where do I want to be to get into the green or get into the hole? And how is my first shot to get there? And so in this sense, it's very much like this, like, understand your customer, understand your prospect, understand where they want to see their content, how they want it delivered to them, what messages resonate with them. And then you can start backwards and you can start to figure out how to make that stuff. In that statement, right, just to kind of be more functional about this, how do you go about learning those things or educating yourself on your prospects or your customers at that stage? Like what are some of the steps that you would take there?
Yeah. So I was fortunate enough that when I started at Triple Whale, we already had like, I want to say 1,000, 1,500 Shopify brands using us.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually had a decent amount of data to start working with. And when I say data, I don't mean like what's in HubSpot or what's in Salesforce, like basic information and geographic location. I think customer personas, like as a concept, have gotten very watered down and become this like weird process that we do. And then we just like put it in the filing cabinet and we walk away. We never think about it again. The way that I approached it when I started at Triple Whale was that I actually spent the first 2 weeks at the company. First week, I did internal interviews with every relevant stakeholder that's interacted with customers, helped build a product, whatever, and tried to understand everything about their perspective on who we are, what we do, what jobs we solve. My brain is very much operationalized for the jobs to be done framework. Mm-hmm. So I was just kind of like working internally on that. And then I spent the next week doing customer interviews with 3 types of customers. Super advocates, obviously, like, your VIPs, your people that you're really getting the LTV out of. Lukewarm people, I would say, who are just like, they just kind of exist and coast, and you probably don't hear from them a lot, but incentivize them at least to get on the phone with me and tell me what is going on between them and the product. And then people who are like the grumpiest, angriest, most frustrated, churned customers in the world to understand what went wrong. Because at some point they signed up, they were interested. And so like, where was the messaging or positioning gap between what they wanted and what we actually offered?
Sure.
And so that was how I approached it. I think it varies. I mean, it varies based on how much data you have, but if you don't have customers yet, or you don't have customers at volume yet, there are alternative routes, which is obviously finding competitor products and then figuring out who customers of those competitor products are and figuring out why they like them, and do kind of the same process. Obviously, like kind of beta testing and demoing to other people to get feedback and understanding if they fit into your feature ICP, all that kinds of stuff. But essentially, I would go through this customer interview process, and then I would synthesize it and kind of drill it down into not necessarily like personas like, this is Jill that lives in Wisconsin and like blah, blah, blah. But it's more so like...
Sorry, do you remember when HubSpot first launched their personas and it was exactly that?
Yes!
Oh my God.
Cartoon people? Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, exactly. That's what I think of. Literally, that's exactly what I think of when I think of like, almost like, I feel bad because HubSpot is obviously like a behemoth. Like I would never talk down on HubSpot. But like, I think that those are like the bonk kind of personas that don't actually like get you very far. But for me, what I ended up doing was then kind of taking those sentiments from customers and fitting them into that like jobs to be done kind of framework, and then figuring out more so the role and then the use case that someone had for using our product. And what we're actually going to be rolling out onto our site very shortly, onto our Triple Whale website, is a new user interface in which you essentially can say like, hey, I'm a CMO, and see like a personalized page for like what Triple Whale is and can do for you, and then quotes from like CMOs and testimonials from CMOs. So like kind of building based off of those people, as opposed to, we've grown really fast. There's been a lot going. So there's finally some beautiful marketing web dev happening. But yeah, so like really trying to understand who those people are. And you might not have one persona. You might have like 3 really different ones. Like us, we have, we work in like the ad attribution and marketing data analytics space. So we have everything from like a junior media buyer all the way up to like a founder CMO. And so they're often really different personas with different goals and jobs to be done that they're looking for in the product. But understanding that there can be multiple, understanding how they literally talk about the problem you're solving, the words and actual phrases that they use, and then modeling language off of those and whatever you build, your funnels, your content, your everything. That's where I've had kind of the most success.
Okay, that makes so much sense. One of the things that you said there really stuck out to me, which was incentivize the people that were either lukewarm or like hated you. How did you what did you do to incentivize them to get on the phone with you? Because that's always a tricky one, right? Like if somebody churns, the last thing they want to do is talk to a company or a representative from a company that they churn from. It's like, what did you offer them to get them on the horn?
Would you be impressed if I told you that I've spent $0 and haven't actually leveraged any way of it? Yeah. So I'll give you a hack. Don't everyone go doing this, because it's going to start to like dilute the efficacy. But no, actually, the reality is that even people who churned, like I said, they showed up for a reason. They signed up for a reason. Mm-hmm. I approached it like, hey, I am actually new-ish to this company, or I'm working on this new project. I really want to understand what went wrong, because I want to go back to my team and either one, make sure that we can refine the messaging or whatever we did wrong to miscommunicate to you so that it doesn't happen to other people in the future. Or B, I want to be able to go back to my product team and say, here's what was missing. I want to make the product better. We have like really high rebound rates. Okay. So people who will basically, we build our product really fast. We're constantly releasing new features. So we would have people who come and say like, I didn't have access to this one data point that I needed, and I thought it was going to be there or something. And so I would be able to take information from that, go back to our teams. If it was like a really big or valuable client or something like that, they would prioritize actually building it or getting it done, which was awesome. But for those grumpy people or lukewarm people, really saying like, help me help you. Like, I want to make this product better. And we, I would say very much like crowdsource. It was actually part of our initial like product-led growth strategy, was really crowdsourcing feedback and development ideas into and for the product. And so that was actually super helpful, a year-ish ago when I was looking to do these customer interviews, is like the help me help you model.
I love that. I think it's so funny because immediately when you say incentivize, people are like, all right, what can I give you? Like, is it money?
Yeah.
Is it rewards? Is it gift cards? Is it like a whatever? And to take that clearly the opposite way of like, yeah, those things are fine, but they're all temporal, right? What people really want is a service that solved the problem that they had in the first place, right? So if you can have them have confidence that you're going to help get there, then that's kind of the goal. Really, really cool way of spinning that. That is a really nice hack. I appreciate that. Cool. So, all right. So we're at the point now that we've now gotten a bunch of information. We've started to build out our persona layer. We have X number of personas that we want to be able to go after. Like, what's the next step in building out the strategy? Let's call it like lead gen. Let's say, because you were very clear about mentioning like there's lead gen, retention, brand awareness, and other things. But like, let's say we were looking to build out a lead gen strategy, and those are some of the assets that we've developed so far. What would you do as the next step there?
Yeah, so I think part of this relates to your persona, but you really need to understand how your end user consumes content. What I found in the e-commerce world is that things like longer form white papers, multi-page PDFs, like downloadable guides, things like that, they either have to be super tactical for someone to actually download them because they want to literally learn stuff and then go do stuff with it.
Yeah.
And if it works or they trust it, then they're like, okay, this company knows what they're doing. Or they want stuff super bite-sized. So like our Twitter presence actually has been a huge lead gen mechanism for us, because we'll take either data, information, whatever we have, and we'll split it up into like a four tweet kind of thread thing. And people will literally come to us from Twitter and be like, I saw your thread on XYZ, what's going on in the market, benchmarks that you shared, State of the Union. That's really interesting that you have access to that data. That's really interesting that, you know, you have such strong data points. Come to us from that. So thinking about like how your person is going to consume content. Also, a lot of folks in e-commerce are huge podcast people. Surprise, surprise. Here we are recording a podcast. And so like you are clearly recording, right, these podcasts for WAIR, right? Which is like an awesome thing that you're doing for the universe, but also has benefit for WAIR as well. And probably has benefit for you as your personal brand. And so like you've figured out, as we've all figured out, the podcasts are like a great lever to pull. So I think figuring out what format you want to produce content in is closely related to persona, but also helps you plan what you need to do to get there. And then the other thing that I say is like, it is so much easier to think through end to end what you're doing content wise, as opposed to like creating something and then trying to figure out how you're going to distribute it or use it. And so, because like in that latter situation, you sometimes find yourself reformatting, trying to like fit a square peg into a round hole. Whereas if you start from the top and you're like, okay, here's who I'm targeting, here's the format that I want to do it in, here's the goal, here's what I'm going to communicate to them. You kind of create yourself like a brief that's end to end. Here's what I'm going to sit down and actually churn out, or my team's going to churn out today. You're going to have way more success at evaluating like the minutia of that thing. So you can then take that same content maybe and try it in different formats and see if it was a formatting issue. Or you can try taking that same format using different content and seeing if it, you know, was a content issue. And so you have like almost like you would with creative testing with advertising, you have different levers that you can pull to kind of, you know, play around with the efficacy of the content that you're producing, but always having an end goal in mind, I think is huge. A lot of what I've learned about content strategy and content marketing has come from MKT1. I'm going to butcher the last names of the guys who run it, but they're incredible. If you haven't looked it up, they have like a Substack, MKT1. They have great like briefs and resources and all kinds of things you can use on content strategy. And I subscribe to it. I literally have a notebook where I take tons of notes on it every week. It has been really foundational to how I think about content strategy. But I think one of the things that's always stuck with me is that like, take the current climate. Everybody's talking about AI right now, and just about everybody could write an article about like, what is ChatGPT and how you could use it in e-commerce, right? But everybody's doing that, and that doesn't really give me anything unique or exciting. That's like not going to be a lead gen mechanism for you or for me or whatever. It's going to be just like one other article that probably feels SEO optimized. So when you're creating content for whatever purpose, I challenge you to ask yourself, like, what unique perspective, before you even sit down to write, what unique perspective or value add am I going to provide in this thing that I write that is going to make it different than like anything else with the same keywords that I could Google and find from other SaaS companies, from other e-commerce companies, whatever. And if you aren't adding your own twist, edge, blade, knife, whatever you want to call it to it, you're wasting your time. You're like super wasting your time. And people aren't going to read it because there are probably like a billion other things that are very similar and they've already read like two of them.
I think it's a really interesting concept. I mean, there's definitely content for the purpose of SEO, which is necessary.
Totally.
But then there's content for the purpose of consumption, right? And in that sense, you definitely have to have an angle that you're approaching that is unique, right? You have to find some signal within the noise because everybody's following the trend out there. So it makes a ton of sense. How do you feel like most content creators need to also sort of have a personal brand in that sense? Because in that guise, like I have a spin that people are used to thinking about and they're used to seeing this spin from me on this. And so whenever I pop this content out there, it's like, oh yeah, Greg writes this way, so there's going to be this interesting twist on it. Or can that be created as you're building the content?
So I think there's like your brand presence, right? So for example, when when we release content from Triple Whale and we're talking about like what's going on in the industry trends, whatever, we'll try and infuse it with data that we have access to from our back end. So not like releasing customer data, but saying like broad spectrum, like we're seeing, you know, TikTok ad spend doing this, we're seeing customer acquisition costs doing this or whatever. So like for us, we have our own, I would say, even though we have different writers that write for Triple Whale, we have our own kind of tone that we use, which is very conversational and like no fluff. It's not what's the word that I'm looking for? Like it's very non-clinical, I would say almost. Like it's just kind of like warm and like
enjoyable.
Here's the state of what's going on and here's what it means for you. Like we'll literally write phrases like that. And so I think you can have like separate people that write on your behalf, guest posts, whatever, that maybe have their own thing going on. Then you can have like your brand or the people that work at your brand, their kind of thing that's infused to what's going on with your brand. And then when it comes to like your personal Twitter, so like I never woke up and was like, I need to build a personal brand. I just started tweeting like literally my shower thoughts one day, and then people started following me, and then now I'm at this point where I have like 8,000 plus followers, and I'm like, I still want to tweet. Like literally yesterday, I tweeted that I ripped my pants. I have this Monday curse that's going on right now, where like a couple Mondays ago, I went to Starbucks. They had literally no coffee at the Starbucks, and they were like, all we can do is make you an iced tea. And I was like, what's going on? And then the following Monday, I left my house and I had toothpaste on my face and nobody told me. And I was like at the grocery store, nobody said anything. And then yesterday I ripped my pants. Anyway, so now I have this like series, like my Monday Chronicles of like, what is the curse? I don't know. Who have I karmically wronged? So like, I have, all of us that work at Triple Whale that are on Twitter, we have the little whale logo or whale emoji next to our names. We have Triple Whale in our bios. We do tweet and retweet stuff about Triple Whale, but we also are like individual people. And I think mine is very much like, I am who I am, like kind of going back to that authenticity thing.
Totally.
And for some reason, people think it's funny. Maybe they like to laugh at me. I don't know if they're laughing with me or at me, but it seems to work. And so like, I don't have like a refined personal brand. It's just like literally things in my brain that I will put on the internet, and sometimes people like them and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
But I think like there are totally people that curate their personal brand and it works well for them. I just like, God bless them. I just don't have the time. Like I don't like you're getting my shower thoughts and then like a couple good threads a week. I'm sorry.
That's awesome. Okay, totally.
That's my philosophy.
I think that makes sense. I mean, I don't have much of a Twitter brand or presence, but I think I have more of a LinkedIn presence. Is like, I don't know, 100 times bigger. And it's very much that, right? Like I've kind of found the niche and I talk about kids and like family and entrepreneurship a lot, but not necessarily all WAIR related, right? It's like WAIR is a part of that. It's a big piece of who I am in my life, but there's also all of this other stuff that affects me and impacts me on a daily basis that I think could also be impactful for other people. So yeah, I can definitely hear that thread. All right. So one of the things that I always with content, right? So we develop some strategy, we go from there. And then I always get stuck on like the KPIs because they're so nebulous in so many different situations. And just your face right there tells me that this is a very complicated sort of concept. But like, how do you think about it, right? How do you look to be like, okay, that was great. That one fell on its face. Like, and then now what do we do?
Yeah. So please do not Google like what should my KPIs be for my blog article for my content team, and then like wake up and put that in their KPI document and then hold them to it. The reality is it depends on how you're distributing content, but distribution very much impacts a lot of performance KPIs. So whether you're looking at things like how many people, like how many unique page views you have on blog articles, or how many downloads you have of downloadable resources, like did you send paid traffic there? Are you relying totally on organic? Did you build your website a month ago or 6 months ago? What's your domain authority like? Like that's going to impact how many people you can get to your website, right? And so there are often like a lot of like confounding variables, I think, when it comes to content assessment. So the way that I like to evaluate it is the way that I think I would evaluate any metrics in any business that is, early stage, which is like, you just got to start doing it. And like, once you have maybe 2 quarters worth of data, 3 quarters worth of data, you have something to try and beat. You're kind of competing against yourself, right? So like for us, we, one of our KPIs is like delta is like percent growth in unique page views, or delta is in like, we want more people to download our guides this month than they did last month. But there are multiple pieces of strategy related to that, right? There's like where it's going into like drip sequences versus on our website versus is it getting backed by paid and like running on paid social. So I think it's just important to remember that like the person who writes the content might not actually be the person who's responsible for some of those performance-based metrics that are more quantitative, I would say. There are things that you can use that you can kind of attribute to content quality, like time on page, but they're not always super accurate and like don't account for the person who like leaves, comes back because they're like, kids started flinging food in the kitchen and they had to read 6 sentences every 10 minutes.
That sounds like me.
And then you also
have an agreement to review.
Yeah.
Paragraph in, and then somebody's yelling or screaming or fighting or arguing or something, like, okay, I'll be back. And I like highlight it, start here.
Yep. Exactly. I can super relate. I don't have kids, but I have 2 very high energy dogs, which are nothing like kids, and I'm aware, but they start like scrummaging, battling in the background, and I have to like make sure nobody's bleeding. But yeah, so things like that. And then you also can, also leverage things like click-through rates on maybe emails, for example. And there you're just kind of, you're obviously relying on like the copy that was written in that email if your content writer didn't write it, but at least figuring out like topically what's interesting or getting people to engage can kind of be guiding metrics to help you be creating in the right direction. Similarly to content performance metrics, like I work in the world of brand, where brand awareness metrics are like the most ethereal, impossible thing in the world. Like, how do you evaluate if your brand awareness has grown besides things that are very much impacted by other things?
Yeah.
It's really hard. And so I think it's much easier to evaluate yourself against yourself and work towards growth within your business than try and like set some random unreasonable KPI that we want, X amount of downloads or X amount of site visits, and not have the historical like benchmark data to say like, is that even achievable for us this month,
Yeah, totally. So with that in mind, like, how do you think about investing into content, especially in the early days, right? Because I totally agree that it's really hard to evaluate yourself against some nebulous article that's written out there about what content should be and should result in. But as you said, like you're 2, 3, 4 quarters in, and now you're starting to sort of evaluate yourself against yourself. But you also have seasonality in there, especially for e-commerce businesses. So how do you know when to like, all right, cool, this is working, let's put some more gas on this, versus like, I don't know, like let's maybe pull back and rethink and then re-strategize about how to move forward.
Yeah, this isn't going to be like the most eloquent and deeply intellectual thing you've ever heard, but frankly, living in startup land, I live and breathe by the keep it simple, stupid method as much as I can.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if the goal of the thing that I am producing is clear, i.e. I need people to download this and then go from MQL to SQL, or I need people to book a demo through this form on this page or whatever, like, is it doing the thing that it needs to do? Is it doing the thing at the volume that I want it to do? Yay or nay? That's kind of my initial evaluation in the beginning. And in theory, you hopefully have like a couple different variants of a thing to figure out which one is doing the thing that you need it to do better. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'm putting gas. So like when I'm creating case studies that we can use to, I create all the case studies for Triple Whale. And so like we use those as a lead magnet. And so like even just creating a variety of case studies and then figuring out which ones are performing the best. And then in terms of who's submitting for email capture, whatever.
Yeah.
And then determining like, okay, what about this one was different that it outperformed the other 2? let's figure it out and then put more gas there. Like that's kind of how I approach it in the beginning. And then just remembering also that like you were the one who made the thing, right? So like you have an expectation for its performance, be it that it's capturing emails or getting people to your website or whatever. And if it's like not doing the thing, then you need to try something else out, frankly. And if it's not doing the thing at the volume that you want, then you need to figure out why it's not doing the thing at the volume you want. I know that's like not a really, really valuable answer, but like honestly, that's how I approach it. And I think if you're thinking of it more deeply than I am and having great results, incredible. But I know a lot of people who are great at their job that do it the way that I do. And it works out for me.
Awesome. I love that. Well, Alexa, look, I've taken a ton of your time. I really appreciate it. I think that over the course of this conversation, like I said, I really wanted to kind of uncover how you think about content, how you think about strategies, how you think about the KPIs and the distribution of that content. I think so often that content is looked at as from a creation perspective, but not necessarily from a distribution perspective. And I think throughout this is like, dude, start with your reader, start with the person, how you're going to get it to them, and then figure out what that's going to be. And I just totally agree with that. But I want to ask you in wrap up. So outside of work, which you obviously do a lot of, right? Seeing how fast you've kind of grown in your career, what are your favorite non-work activities that you really love to invest in?
I grew up in a super musical family. So I did competitive collegiate a cappella. I don't do it anymore, womp womp, but I still play piano. I used to figure skate in high school and I just moved back to Boston. So I'm going to start ice skating again, which I'm really excited about.
That's cool.
And I have 2 dogs that absolutely think that they're humans. They like sleep in bed with me every night and they get so much love and attention. It's borderline disgusting.
All right. So fun fact, my favorite movie of all time, my wife makes so much fun of me for this, is Pitch Perfect. And so like, I love that movie from like, just singing a cappella. I'm like, this is great. This is awesome.
Yeah, I have to send you some links. It's a little bit like that in real life, but also a lot of it
not. Sounds good. Well, Alexa, thank you so much for being on with me today. I really appreciate it. Just to wrap up, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you? What are the best channels?
Yeah, I am just at Alexa Kilroy. My last name is Kilroy on Twitter, and same on LinkedIn. You are always welcome to hit me up. My DMs and things are always open. And then if you're interested in Triple Whale, it's just triplewhale.com.
Awesome. Alexa, thank you so much for your time and for being with us today.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you for having me. This was super fun.
Yeah. All right. Ciao.